I always knew that I could sing better than most other people could sing. I also knew that I could do it, but I didn't want to be in show business particularly. That's a quandary, and it still is a quandary. How can you sing if you're not in show business?
I fancied her right when I first saw her. I thought, oh, she's all right. And but then when she sang, I thought, oh my God, out of my depth.
She got on stage and she started to sing, and it was just the most fantastic, you know. I mean, a really, really thoroughbred voice just emanated from this girl. It was just, you know, it was absolutely sensational.
Barbara can take a straightforward pop song and turn it into something that sucks you in, even though it's only 3 minutes long.
Enigma le fod chwtsie behe va Barbara Dickson siaplen y figet nid a haini schon a hietyrus an a musical. Hai imig mollig a jane vore van oorsen, imig doe varach na misk baun an obi I. Yn cael 3 musical yn cael sier wonnen va henem bilen yn llwy. Ach va Barbara yn arstolar fat dusan blianer on a show. Fat nen schisketens, nen scherketen, bi een jene hing varianliche vasas an a sing is koers den klappig in folk. Bij kiet churim foploch shine club folkvik a balle heen, doen farlijn. Beke jise noorsen, ging hosnagi uire chlu, le could shine.
I came from a family where my mother was desperate to make an impact on the world, but didn't really have the skills or the confidence. And my father was a very typical Scotsman of his generation who said, keep your head down. You know, don't put your head over the parapet. No, that's not, you shouldn't do that. Don't get noticed, it's bad. My mother used to play lots and lots of records in the house. She had a radiogram, an old 50s radiogram. Used to play everything from classical music via Frank Sinatra to light opera and stuff like that. So I've grown up with a fairly good working knowledge of classical music from music that my mother played on 78s on that gramophone. The famous story was me singing in a high pram and the postman saying to somebody at my granny's back door, where's that singing come from? And my granny said, oh, that'll be the bairn. My mother believed in my ability, but would never have put me in for a talent competition. My mother utterly despised that sort of thing. She thought it was completely ghastly. So she was a terrible snob musically.
Chai Barbara Arach an den Farlin good just join darna cocky, aun er van duich geleid a fein shachet et leeskris na blianach in raya. Sna leicheten, Louis en Chilloch Dickson van Dachivik prefab good tain up a vaughan. Maar technology is het boy behegunje is school dat jiggerin rock and roll van de gietris.
It was when I got to secondary school that I realised that other people were picking up on the fact that I could sing really well. One being, most importantly, being Sandy Sadler, who was my music teacher at Woodmill School in Dunfermline.
The very first class I got was Barbara's class. It's all very well having classical singing, etc., but we had to have something for the mainstream of the school who, well, were really more interested in pop and that and so on and so forth. But I didn't want to become known as a pop music school, so I turned to folk and I had a wee folk club. And then along she comes dragging this massive guitar and she started to play and sing with it as well. And then before you realised that other people were singing along while it was almost like a class, you know, and she was strumming away on the guitar.
Hang down your head, Tom, Julie, hang down your head.
Sandy played me an album by the Kingston Trio. And the Kingston Trio were the first to really massively kind of crossover folk music group. So I was listening to that music via Sandy. And in the meantime, I was playing Shadows tunes with my friends, who were all boys. It's not like I didn't have any girlfriends. I had lots of girlfriends at school when I was 12, but none of them played the guitar. I had the Nick Lucas guitar tutor. Was a book, I've still got it, and it had the spots on the diagram, so you'd be going like this, and you could play these things. This was the beauty of it. It wasn't like highly produced music. You could play these things in your own bedroom.
We used to sit and harmonise and sing the Everly Brothers songs and some folk songs, and we liked Peter, Paul and Mary, and we used to have their LPs. Barbara was in love with Don Everly.
She found this girl, Sheila Melbourne, their voices merged beautifully, really. And they started singing solo. So, of course, we have the school concert. And that's where I think they first appeared in public, the two of them singing I Gave My Love a Cherry. And from then on, they just went from success to success.
And of course there was Cliff. Most people either liked Cliff or liked Elvis. We got into trouble for going to see Summer Holiday one evening when we were supposed to be revising for our shorthand exam the next day. But we still went to the pictures to see the film instead.
Maar nou maar aan ik neidjig tegen te kicher van de Beatles creme chuir chosan en carchalatain agus va five voor voi Beatlemania. Maar geitjig ook colossal dun farlin ach va kjol gulioran aan te halig. Va club folk se valle svik Barbara minnig gelahed.
It's up with an infant lion. It's up with an infant lion and June me Kennedy.
I was lucky enough to be born in a place where there was one of possibly the 3 best folk clubs in Scotland.
Het dachi clubbe a hou verkeerd kar an arid sem fallig voor woe kiule show. Hij could woon de vervanage John Watt, niach kiule heen, agus van Shomer en Coney Lummelaan.
I've not been in this room since the 1960s. I remember it being wide. I think the stage was there, and I think the audience were there, and I seem to remember them being tiered. I remember sitting high up.
It should be called the powder room cake.
It was after hours, so it didn't start till late at night. And I was quite young then, so it was quite difficult for me to come when it first started. But I wanted to hear the music, because by that time, of course, Sandy Sadler had encouraged me to listen to folk music. I was playing folk music on my guitar. I was listening to these albums by Peter, Paul and Mary and Bob Dylan and all those people. And it was the folk club. There wasn't another place to go.
By John Watt fer an thehes a club, agus who get boy larger at Barbara.
I had been going to the folk club a couple of times. I was with a group of school friends, so it wasn't long after I'd left school. And John Watt got up, as was customary in folk clubs, to say, would anybody like to get up and sing? Now that happened every week, and that happened in every folk club as well. This is why it was so kind of all-inclusive and so... I don't know, it's so wonderful. When people talk to me about show business, I always say, what show business? I was asked to get up and sing in an environment where anybody could get up and sing and play. And that was how gentle and kind it was. And anybody would have a go in those circumstances. But even so, I was very nervous when my friends all said, she will. Why don't you get up? And I went, oh, I don't know. Anyway, she will, they said. And I did get up.
Oh, please understand, my love
Is Jamer a chaint de Barbara a hier tussen heinie a hauf van een sisket se keher, hier John Water a chillige hein. Beshaw een geheim a hoek aardige getur de behe. Wat trochit raid line fadde oerasgelig, agus wat de nation peace man a baskeri lien. Goedig is joishin, gaf Barbara a gau shech ben jiek oper sintjerevish chahara, agus gloishi a genation. Ga bij hulletunje een garstigis, dus je shocketa.
My parents were very upset, but my mother most especially, because nobody did that. Nobody just left home for no reason. Remember, I was not going to university. I was actually choosing to leave home, and my mother said until the day she died how hurt she was. However, I wasn't going to live my life according to how my mother felt. I was a young woman. I didn't want to be a young woman like my mother's generation. And we were politically very aware. I remember we would be walking about in our duffel coats, and the difference between the boys and the girls was the boys had beards. That was the only difference. Sometimes the girls were shorter, sometimes they weren't. But we were always wandering about in Edinburgh.
Take a look at some other places.
Bij Shanyater al getandige gemachen van de Rob Nooks a Cooper a Five. Bij JL na Brian Everly agus na Beatles, maar wel Barbara. Ach wij missel kern folk gewarach.
Some friends and I went to the folk club in Ely, and Barbara and Jack Beck and Barbara Dickson were the guests that night, because Barbara was out and about doing that as a named artist a couple of years before I was ever able to do that. So that's when I first saw and heard Barbara, which was a most impressive thing. And then we met sometime not long after that, but in Sandy Bell's pub.
At lunchtime. And somebody said, "This is Rab Noakes." And we were 17 when that happened.
Our parents had all fought or seen action in the Second World War, and we came along after that. And I've always thought that I just grew up in a completely different world. Because your folks couldn't tell you anything about this stuff.
Because they'd never been there.
They'd never been.
Young people of our generation, born when they were born, wanted to make the world a better place. It was political, it was Scotland, playing up your own culture.
It's not to be underestimated.
It's not at all.
And there were some remarkable people.
This is 1964, we're talking about our 65. So it's a hell of a long time ago.
There's free to fry and free to boil and free to beat the light.
Va clue ik na McCalmans met hennet er figid huil. Jerig at amach a sul fo gnagents na shisketen, a goed chluppigen se hehen shenshe.
You would have people kind of going between these bars. Christy Moore would drop into Sandy Bell's. We would go over to Ireland. You could have a session with Jerry Rafferty, Billy Connolly, the Furies. Roy Williamson would come play flute. I remember Finbar Fury and Roy Williamson always exchanging tunes.
I really don't know how it happened, how this enigma of the folk scene happened. Now, when I look at it, it's all fiddlers and tunes and stuff. But then there was a most colourful of people.
You came here to meet, and spontaneously there would be singing and playing at the back. So if Ali Bain arrived from Shetland, which I remember when he did originally come here, someone would say, "Ali, give us a tune." So there'd be a tune at the back. The McCalmans would kick off a song. 500 people would join in.
So there were parties all the time, great parties. I remember going to a party in Fife, and Barbara and Archer were there, and I came back with a guy called George Craigie and Derek and Hamish, and we had to walk 10 miles to the nearest place, and it was raining, and in the middle of the night we were under this tree and singing Tom Paxton songs, and we got to the main conurbation, this houses, and we had drinkers' truth by this time. And this milkman was delivering milk. This is how bad we were. We were terrible people in those days. And we saw the milkman deliver milk, and we nipped over and we took the milk and we left money. Isn't that cute? That was. But I remember Barbara being at that party and with Archie and an almighty session.
What happened to these parties is that there'd be a session happening in this room and there'd be a session happening in that room. And the greatest sessions were always in the bathroom because of the acoustics. And I walked past the bathroom and I heard this voice, and it was Barbara singing with Jack Beck. And there was this voice that just soared and seemed to have complete control and emotional content. It wasn't just a pretty noise. It had a timbre to it that spoke of understanding what they were saying about. And so kicked in the door, and there was Barbara.
It's so rare, and the flowers so fair. Together they grew in the vine.
Immediately you heard Barbara in those days, it was quality. It just came out that you were listening to a quality singer. So she didn't really have to try to draw in a lot of people. And she looked great as well, lest we forget. A lovely girl, still is, but in those days, obviously, younger, and so you had a lot of guys going, you know. And she was great.
But now the heart is filled.
Len behe Barbara slie turet rianlichtje na de liki woepe a hooper waa schon scheine clubfolk in Tivoli and in Copenhagen. Hol she hier klaar in a jane ver een navliene a koper kutcheri Archie Fisher. But een naike jakes a shechget a glei a kiet kunant klari.
It was the making of you to get an album. But in those days it was company driven, and they wouldn't do it without thinking there was a profit in it. And Barbara got that on her own merits. It was obvious that other people were going to notice this voice. Archie, brilliant singer and idiosyncratic in so many arrangements and influential, but Archie was never going to make it on the kind of big commercial scene. But you could hear that Barbara was.
Come to me now, you know we are so alone, and life is free.
We were all at Sandy Bell's one night, and the door burst open, and Barbara's there with a guitar case. And she said, I've got a gig in Lithgow and I haven't got the train fare. I'll pay you back as soon as you get the fee. And we said, fine. So we all raked about for what change we had in the bar. And she gathered it up, said, thanks, boys. And she would dash that. Before the door swung flat, closed, we had her shouting, taxi! So John DeBarry turned to me and said, bound for glory. And she certainly was, and deserved it as well.
Come round me out, come bold me out to Charlie. I'll be John Ross and never Bobby to ferry me out to Charlie. We'll lower the water, we'll lower the sea, we'll lower the water to Charlie. Come we'll, come woe, we'll gather and go, and live or die with Charlie. I swear by moon and stars abreast, and sun that glances early, if I had 20,000 lives, I'd lose them all for Charlie. We'll lower the
was all these people around, all doing different sorts of music, but we all would, you know, sometimes we would have a night off, or I would have a night off and I would go to a folk club, but I'd go to see someone play. I was in Edinburgh a lot of that time, so people like Billy would be coming through the city.
There was a great thing, you get your fee plus expenses and accommodation, which was a big lie. You know, accommodation was usually a couch in somebody's house. And I used to tell people I could tell the difference between Axminster and Wilton by the taste. I'd slept in so many floors.
I remember you liked to kind of be different with your clothing.
I did. I wore very gaudy, stripy clothes, and clothes with stars on them and all that. And the reason was, when I was solo, that kind of behaviour started. Because I'd show up at a club in Bolton or Barnsley or something, and nobody would know I was the guest. I was just another guy with Levi's and a guitar case. And people would say to me, "Who's the guest tonight?" And I said, "Me." "Oh, fine." and I thought, I'm going to do something about this. When I walk in the door, they're going to know who the guest is. So he's going, ba-vam, yellow stars and deck chair kind of trousers and all. And it was good.
An the neideg seachgad sa hún va cúnant chlári ag Barbara, vai noch go minnig television, agus vai vi clwych yn clubich yn folk yn alabe fat siap bliana. I ganyan sio, becherk yn cheach gesteach.
Back again. A wiki on a Caspy's land for Highland Harry back again.
Hamish Imlach helped me enormously, and he said, if you go with me to the north of England, over a weekend I'm playing Sunderland, Sheffield and Liverpool. And he said, if you go to those folk clubs, which are great big folk clubs, with lots of other folk club organisers attending them, he said, I bet you'll get work.
In almost every big English kind of city conurbation, there was some kind of a folk circuit. I don't know, it was as big as Liverpool. Birmingham had a very flourishing one. Manchester had a flourishing one. There's a very flourishing circuit in Yorkshire. And so when I first started going to these clubs, I'd see singers who were doing a British tour or a regional tour.
At the time, I was just doing a floor spot, and I did the same little set of 3 songs in each of those folk clubs. And I think Hamish, being Hamish, must have said, you know, she's come a long way, see what you can do for her. And it is absolutely true that from those 3 floor spots, I had a career in the north of England, and that also blossomed into a career in other places.
When Barbara started playing down here, she'd already developed a repertoire that was not exclusively Scots. She had a very good repertoire of Scots songs, English traditional songs, and she was a great ambassador for Scots writers. She was a great, proselytizer for Rab Noakes and for Archie Fisher as a writer, as well as doing songs by James Taylor, who wasn't that kind of widely known. So I think it was much easier for Barbara to play the English scene.
It's all about the takeover by Londoners of the North East.
You could do a little tour of about, 8 to 10 days, which in those days was quite decent money. It was well paid. When I think that my dad used to get £9 a week, I could get virtually that for one night.
We ran a successful club, the Ford Arms, in Byker, part of Newcastle. And Barbara was staying at my house because I had got her a week's work and she didn't have a gig that night, the Tuesday night. Can you get me on? And so we said, yes, of course we'll get you on. Sandy Denny was our guest.
You're a crazy lady.
A lot of people knew Barbara because she'd worked the clubs around and it was terrific. She went down a storm. Sandy Denny and her manager were peering down with this volume of applause for Barbara. And as I walked past, she turned to her manager and said, who the f*** is she? Barbara didn't want to outdo anybody. She just wanted to play.
Va torgaun de huher Barbara. Lei seachgad sa 3 va alapa agel agus va manager eiche.
Temptation strong. love just like a man. And if you wanna do right all day, woman, you gotta be a do-right all night man.
I learned my craft. I learned how to play the guitar. I learned how to get better at that. And I learned it for myself. I didn't learn it for the audience. I knew that I was good and I could do it.
As long as we're together, baby, you gotta show some respect for me. So if you wanna...
We look at people like Barbara nowadays, and it's like she's been sprinkled with magic dust that suddenly produced this star. She's worked the board, she's done the folk clubs, she's been in back rooms and damp mattresses in someone's place with a party going on next door. She's done all that. The fact that her voice was undoubtedly better than most of her contemporaries, I think escalated her into a different sphere.
You gotta be a do-right all night man.
By this time, a couple of years after I first met Barbara, I'd gone back to college. Of course, I started a folk club there. And I remember booking Barbara 15 quid. And about a week before, I got a call from this guy called Bernard Theobald. And he said, about this booking for Barbara Dickson, he said, I'm calling to tell you that the price has gone up to 19 quid. What? I was incensed. But, you know, it was Barbara. And it being a teacher training college folk club, we could afford it, you know, so we swallowed it and we paid. But a lot of clubs were really, really upset about it. You know, it was a difficult thing having that kind of management. It was like Bob Dylan suddenly appearing with Albert Grossman saying, you know, you're not giving a kid $5, you're giving him $5,000 or he doesn't play. It was that kind of thing. You know.
We can work it out. We can work it out.
With me is Willie Russell, who wrote the musical. It's told...
Ba Joe Harridge Willie Russell has the gubber mar hitcher nar a hafanne corm de Barbara páirte chluich an san jalav chluich úrege, John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert.
With the sheep. Look, for Christ's sake, Lindy, you've got to stretch.
Be céimar lé a bheith seo de Barbara. Ach, charáir an gairish as I hiad dul amach.
When I went to do John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert in Liverpool, that's when everything changed because I had Willie Russell asking me to sing the Beatles songs, and I think prior to having a manager, I would have said, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but the manager said, you've got to do that show because that is a very good thing for you to do. And that is what managers do. You need somebody to kind of give you a kick in the arse.
I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over.
I first met Barbara backstage at the theatre. She was in John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert. I think the thing that you came away with from that show was the wonderful interpretation of the Beatles songs by Barbara, which was, obviously by then, 1974, Beatles songs had been done by everybody, but this was a beautiful, clear, simple interpretation of just a great voice and piano.
Almost every review talks about this stunning girl at the piano whom we couldn't see because she was hiding behind goggles and hair. I mean, it was almost as though she hid herself. I don't know, you know, she found it difficult, the transition from hiding folky to pop queen. I think she found it difficult to stand in the limelight.
Len, John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert fat bliana in Kent Sheer Lunin, agus Hoshin Barbara Clue Rilin. Hook the company and Clary and Nadia, agus an seachgad sa sia, dan I go fiadva leis náran Answer Me.
Immediately Answer Me was a hit, which was at the beginning of 1976. People started to talk to me in the street and run after me and ask for autographs. I thought that was really weird. I couldn't quite understand what that was about because I'd never been at the receiving end of it, and it embarrassed me. I thought, I am not deserving of this kind of adulation, and I still think that. I still think that's all a load of rubbish.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Dickson.
Just after that was this huge series of the two Ronnies that I did every single week for 8 weeks. 15 million people watching the two Ronnies, and I pop up in the middle of every show and everybody's going, who's this?
Daarna lín an seachgad an bevaun ach cuairst gan sgúr, chwaran, de chudimman agus de program an television. Hu cúnant clári úr chum í clárag an Los Angeles agus a gomar chóirst an breichting le cálan hain. Chonnaig Andra Lloyd Webber agus Tim Rice sich an siari agus havinat chum í Shine clár ceol of musical Evita. Va darna príomh chláraich gyda lín an the seachgad sa hoch.
So what happens now? Where am I going? You'll get by, you always have before. Where am I going to?
I mean, I was aware of her pop career and we stayed in touch. We didn't see as much of her because it was the whole rock entourage, it was the backstage pass now. It was, I mean, look, Barbara was always fantastically welcoming and made sure that we were included in everything. But it just wasn't the same scene, and people were staying in hotels and there were tons of people around, and I didn't spend any real time with Barbara again until it would have been 82 when we started to talk about doing Blood Brothers.
Ag toisiach na hochgadan, gyda 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 Willie Russell sgrifich y drama chos srifach al sefawns yn dwyich, a leis as a hwla hyr bereine. Hw ge corym dy Barbara ma hert na'n Blood Brothers a chlwych sy jalaf chlwych úreke.
We couldn't have somebody who couldn't quite get the notes and all that sort of business. And by the time I wrote the final song, which has got a huge range in it, I thought, we just got to go for Barbara and try and persuade her to do it.
I remember being absolutely terrified and standing, and there was a sort of flat mic taped to one of the uprights in the wings, and I sang, "Tell me it's not true, say it's just a story, something on the news." When I look back on it now, all the things that I consider to be milestones, like Blood Brothers, and before that, John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert, were very important to me. I mean, and if I'd felt I don't want to do anything different, I wouldn't have done Blood Brothers.
And of course, what I'd forgotten is that Barbara's mother, Ruth, was from Liverpool. And so Barbara actually cut a really good, Liverpool accent.
You didn't notify me. Well, I just couldn't I keep them for a few more days, please? Please, they're a pair, they go together. My husband's doing.
What happened then, of course, was throughout rehearsals, Barbara went from a very tentative actress to being better and better and better. And people thinking, my God, I'm going to actually have to flex my muscles to keep up with her here.
Don't tell me which one, just take him. Take him.
Hirevich leis na Blood Brothers agus glúise vo Liverpool go cean siar London, huair Barbara dúis ar na clisach mar Mrs. Johnston. Agus a huve bethe fersante, baun e crwy harish a hachari shona hiaturis i Oliver Cookson.
I was a lowly assistant stage manager.
Do you remember what you first said to me?
Would you like to join our tea kitty?
Tea club.
Tea club.
Yeah, you did.
What an opening line.
Fo iarcha gyd bawnrach gan tea club, ho si gad dyr Syria, agus fósat an neidjag och gyd sy ceir. Fer taich gláger a hors de Barbara tran oper gyleir Blood Brothers.
I sort of went off the rails twice in Blood Brothers, once in Liverpool and then in London. Every week we had 4 shows back to back. You have 8 shows a week and 4 of them are on 2 days.
There was a Friday matinee and a Saturday matinee, and I used to keep saying, right, just think of it as
4 quarters.
4 quarters. I seem to remember we were watching, I was into American football. And you'd go, right, that's 1 quarter out of the way. We'll get through the next one, and then there's the third one. And then Saturday evening came, end of the 4th quarter, into the pub.
I didn't really prosper being in long runs in the theatre, and every time I've done it, I've become ill. There'd be people there who'd maybe travelled from Stornoway to see me in a show. Do you know what? And you can't be rubbish. You've got to be good all the time. That is terrible, terrible pressure for somebody like me. But I know people who are trained in the theatre who can't do it either. If your name's above the title, it's terrible responsibility.
And I was a runner on Top of the Pops looking after Barbara and Elaine, but I don't think a lot of people knew that we were together. So it was quite fun that I was, this is your call, Miss Dickson.
Scaun gebied dunne aun va biao an an jaran chochget se koik nach koele I know him so well. Agus chun bháin dú ha go leor aun ag go bhfuil cuine ar an 9 nóir an seo ag Barbara. Ach, va úlachare tuileag hit sa chrúachuig.
I remember my manager saying to me, put the guitar down and do a sort of Tina Turner along the front of the stage, which is completely laughable now, because I could never do something like that. It's just a ridiculous kind of way to see me being marketed. And you can't do stuff like that if you don't want to do it. You just look really stupid. I became more, I suppose, more worried about myself, more intransigent, really believed that everything Jerry Rafferty thought about the music business was right. That they were out to get you and you just had to be very careful.
Lenny ora is shine agus a clwych, ach le toisiach na nuchatan va Barbara a tírig an chean leis an dohansigh meach. A mis gan noch ciú leis an roi gúpid va clwychad NML an Turam Eel, Danny Thompson.
I met Barbara and we worked on that Dylan track. You know, it was nice. So I think for the two of us there was like, I hope there will be another opportunity. Because the other sad thing in our profession is we're together with different lineups, doing different projects, and then you move on to somewhere else, and you think, oh, I'd love to see them again. Of course, you may see them in 2 years, and that makes it even extra special. And there's a beautiful Bedouin saying, which is, we pitch our tents far apart, so our hearts remain closer. And I think that's very appropriate to our music. It was like 17-year-olds in the garage working out tunes again, you know.
Hush your babe, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. When you wake, you'll have cake and all the pretty little horses. Dapple grey, black and bay, coach and 6 little horses. Hush your babe, don't you cry. Go to sleep, little baby. When you wake, you'll have cake and all the pretty little horses. Way down yonder, down in the meadow, there's a poor little lamb. The bees and the butterflies pecking out his eyes. The poor little thing cried, Mammy. Hush your babe, don't you cry.
had much experience as an actress. I'd done television, just one television production with Taggart just before this, and the rest of my work was in the theatre. I didn't know how to hit a mark, really. It was in Taggart that I learned how to do that and learned all sorts of things. It's an utterly different animal working on television or film to working in the theatre.
Lena beheslia ille rieste mian en neuchten le oper an een drama television. Na vesk Band of Gold ITV. Agus beharichtje en skippe Jeroena Bauld.
I made a huge lifelong friend in Geraldine James. You know, she is still, I look up to her enormously, and she's got this sort of character that she's like the head girl. There's a lot of hysteria in night shoots because you're just so tired. And what we were doing was walking down a road in film rain. And I had never been anything other than professional to my fingertips in the whole of the shoot. I just couldn't stop laughing.
Again, because you're just a tart like the rest of us.
I just kind of sank to the floor without saying a word, but just completely hysterical, put my head down and went into the fetal position on the ground, you know, with the bin bags. And I just remember Geraldine saying, "Pull yourself together, Dickson. Come on, pull yourself together." And I said, "I'm so sorry, Geraldine," because I was wasting not just their time, but our time as well, which was just absolutely unforgivable.
Va clue ag Barbara mar vanach leisige television Relien Band of Gold. Geroi an the musical Volleen Blood Brothers. Ach gaharige cushion idiisht.
There's an old kind of Hollywood story about these guys who are trying to cast for a film, and they're wandering about saying, you know, with this role we need somebody like, you know, I need a Richard Widmark kind of. We need someone like Richard Widmark. Who can we get who's like Richard Widmark? And eventually somebody says, why don't you call Richard Widmark? So you kind of think, you know, yeah, probably need somebody like Barbara Dickson. You know, well, who can you get? Barbara Dickson.
Chai molle gegiane ver spend na rigoskele sich an sier an een neuget san nai. En daarna turis eva Barbara en Kewn musical herivachar. Gosni kujach tulli goishin van Parst Viv Nicholson.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm here to present this year's Laurence Olivier Award for Best Actress in a Musical. And the winner, one of our finest, most accomplished actresses and singers, Miss Barbara Dickson!
The way it's written, she's on stage all the time, but she's not necessarily doing stuff. That makes it a tough role. She's kind of standing there watching everybody else have fun quite a lot of the time.
I remember watching Band of Gold, and I remember seeing Barbara, like most people thought, oh, isn't that the singer? And she was absolutely amazing. And so obviously meeting her for the first time, all the cast were really nervous, as you are when, I suppose, the name comes to rehearsal. But from the moment I met her, I knew we were going to get on.
I loved Spend. I knew also that I'd probably get ill because of the way I am, but I wanted to do it. Because the opening line of that show was, I just stood there, the music stopped, and I said to the audience, I know what you're thinking. What's it like having all that money? And, you know, just like really wry, you know. So I thought, okay, this is a great show. And the whole idea of a life going into a wall at 60 miles an hour, that really intrigued me as well.
For me, it's not just what the person is giving off stage, it's what they're giving off stage as well. And, you know, because without that, you haven't got a happy company. And she was a major part of that, being a really happy company that felt like, yeah, this is going to be good. We're big hitters, you know, we've got her, you know.
People in the theatre are very loving and kind and close and supportive, but for me, my personality was such that I couldn't handle long runs.
You know, no shrinking violet ever survived in this lark. It takes a lot of will and a lot of determination, and You know, for a woman, it's an added struggle. So you need that backbone. And you need it to survive, you know, that lonely business of being on the road. I couldn't do it.
An an dáhíle sa céthir chuirí chlárúr full circle ma scúl, agus dúine gennechaí go raibh Chile go ceall a háirich. Haid a chuir dói agus a ruchgachuch le tráid donaclí leis a roi ar a bhí cúpar fat úni bhór.
I loved her voice. I knew that we were destined. That was really close to the pair of us, to our hearts. Artistically, it's a wonderful thing to be let loose, you know, with arrangements and production with that voice and with those songs. You know, her archives are fabulous, you know, for songs. So I'm absolutely privileged, really, to be just allowed to do whatever I want, which is what I do.
The lassie's courage began to fail, and her rosy cheeks, they grew wan and pale, and the tears came trickling down like hail, or a heavy shower in summer.
The first time I sang it was probably about 1965. It was one of the songs that John Watts suggested that I sing. It was on that list with I Once Loved a Lad. So it was one of the first Scottish songs as a young singer that I learned.
Saying, lassie, lassie, ye shall be mine. I said it all, they try thee.
The way that Troy and I work is extraordinary. I just come here with songs and I sit at the table and I just sing in his ear. I sing the song, unadorned, no guitar, no nothing, because I think I know he knows what to do, and he always knows what to do, and he goes, wow. And that happened with Rigs
It
of Rye.
certainly did. It certainly
I
did.
just would have gone, 'twas in the month of sweet July.
We'll have that.
Yeah. And he said,
And that was
and
it.
he just knows what sort of where to place it, you know, so it kind of.
And it's
as you hear-
it's such a beautiful song, and it's quite, you know, some of the verses are really quite prosaic, you know, and you think, oh yeah, but there's such a beautiful scope for arrangement within the song, you know, because it just cycles round and round like all great traditional songs do, but we just expanded on it, and it came out just the way we wanted it.
They live in Brechin the winter through, and in Montrose in summer.
What you will get from Barbara is an honest song, sung perfectly, delivered perfectly, and it will sound just like somebody in your own front room. Not a massive sound where the voices are all over the place and synthesizers or whatever. So it's an honesty, I think, is what you're looking for there. She is an honest interpreter of good songs.
Sadly for me, her contribution to the folk scene won't be what she's remembered for. It'll be for, you know, duets on Top of the Pops and Caravan and stuff like that, which is absolutely fair enough. But there were lots of good albums that came out and lots of good songs. That's more what I think of her contribution, the fact that people would look at Barbara and say, I want to sing like that, or I want to be where she is.
It only rains when clouds bang together, but everybody knows that. And it's rockets and missiles that are causing this bad weather, but everybody knows that. Everybody knows.
I didn't write that many songs, but of the ones I did, that was my favourite. I had a girlfriend, and her parents were on holiday in Ayrshire in a caravan, and I took her down to meet them. And there was two clouds, I'll never forget it, just two wee white fluffy clouds. And her mother said, "Well, I hope those clouds don't bang together." And I found it really endearing. That her world was so lovely and simple. She had it sorted out. They bang together, it rains.
But does everybody know the way that things are gonna go for them tomorrow? What will they do if they turn round and find that they have no time left to borrow? Zsa Gabor is the world's greatest actress, but everybody knows that. And the sex bomb of the 50s got her first break on a mattress, but everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. But does everybody know the way that things are gonna go for them tomorrow? What will they do if they turn round and find that they have no time left to borrow? It only rains when clouds bang together, but everybody knows that. And it's rockets and missiles that are causing this bad weather, but everybody knows